the tents while they slept. Not rummaged, not torn, not raided. Moved. 4 grown adults in the Colorado wilderness, repositioned like pieces on a board while unconscious under open sky, and none of them woke up. You think camping horror is about bears, killers, or getting lost. It's not. It's about something far older than that. It's about control. This story begins in the spring, outside Buena Vista, Colorado. 4 college friends, broke, adventurous, dispersed camping off some forgotten Forest Service road that seemed to go on forever. No other campers, no tire tracks, just isolation. Isolation is never empty. They set their tents casually, 15 feet apart, loose cluster, beers, cards, laughter, sleep by 11. And here's the first fracture in reality. Every single one of them slept unnaturally heavy. The light sleeper knocked out cold. No cold jolts, no bathroom wake-ups, no forest noise interruptions. When he unzipped his tent at sunrise, he didn't scream. He froze. All 4 tents had been moved into a perfect square, centered around a stacked pile of 4 stones, balanced, deliberate. Stakes still secured, belongings untouched, phone still plugged in, sleeping bags exactly as left, and drag marks in the dirt stopping 10 feet before the final position, as if someone dragged the tents halfway, then lifted them while they were inside. You feel that tightening in your chest? Good, because this isn't just a camping story. This is about ritual geometry. 4 people placed in formation around a central point, and when one of them knocked over the stones, a low rumbling echoed through the distance. Not thunder, not wind, stone grinding against stone, like a door opening somewhere beneath the earth. They didn't discuss leaving. They moved in sync, packing in under 5 minutes, as if sharing one nervous system. And here's what should disturb you most. They never talked about it again. Not really. It fractured something between them, because some experiences don't just scare you, they rearrange you. And that's only the first story. You still think this is random wilderness terror? No, this is pattern recognition training, and you're about to start seeing the pattern. You felt it, didn't you? That subtle shift from creepy camping story to something far more surgical. Because what happened in that Colorado clearing wasn't chaos, it was organization. 4 tents, 4 stones, perfect square. That is geometry, and geometry is never accidental. Ancient civilizations understood something modern men forgot. Shape directs energy, formation directs psychology, placement alters perception. The square is containment, the circle is ritual, the triangle is hierarchy. Someone or something arranged them with intention. And here's the detail most people gloss over. They all slept unnaturally deep. You ever camp? Every snap of a twig wakes you, every gust of wind. But that night, sedation-level sleep. No drugs, no alcohol blackout, just unconscious compliance. Then the dreams. One dreamed of marching in a line through a desert while someone counted steps. Another dreamed of being in the army, marching with soldiers, marching, in formation, under command. You understand what that is? That's synchronization. You don't have to physically move a man to reposition him. You move his mind first. Military training, cult induction, mass psychology, they all use rhythm, repetition, coordinated motion, strip individuality, merge identity. By morning, they described feeling connected, like there was a fifth presence, watching, inside them. That's not just fear talking, that's cognitive merging. When groups experience intense shared trauma or ritual alignment, boundaries blur, emotions sync, thoughts mirror. It feels psychic, but it's neurological. And here's the darker possibility. What if they weren't just moved physically? What if something tested whether four independent minds could be arranged into one unit? Because when the stones fell, the rumbling began. Cause and effect, disturb the formation, trigger the response. And notice this, the rumbling didn't approach them, it announced itself. Like a warning, like something ancient saying, reset the pattern. They fled, but not before the pattern imprinted. You think they drifted apart because of growing up, or because once you've been part of something you don't understand, normal friendship feels thin. Men underestimate how environments reprogram them. Isolation strips noise. Ritual imposes order. Fear fuses identity. And something in that clearing executed all three flawlessly. That was story one. Now we descend deeper, because the second story doesn't involve geometry. It involves bait.
Now we leave Colorado, and we enter a different kind of wilderness, one where the predator doesn't hide in the trees. He walks straight into your firelight. North Carolina, a small campground 3 miles down a Forest Service road, fewer than 7 sites, spread out, isolated, but not abandoned. A couple, young, trying to reconnect. That word always makes me pause. When relationships get stale, people seek intensity. Isolation, firelight, no signal, no distractions. They think they're escaping the noise, but isolation doesn't remove observers. It removes witnesses. He sees the blue sedan when they arrive. Empty sight. No one visible. But someone was there, and someone was watching. That night, as the fire burns low, a man appears at the edge of the light. No footsteps heard, no snapped twigs, just presence. His name is Aiden, 30-ish, intense eye contact, too steady, too focused. And here's what you need to notice. The moment the girlfriend walks back into camp, Aiden shifts. The boyfriend becomes invisible. Predators don't challenge the alpha directly. They assess, they probe, they test the perimeter. Aiden says he's camping solo, trying to get away from people. But he walks into their sight. Contradiction is always a signal. Men ignore contradictions because they don't want conflict. Conflict reveals truth. Later that night, the boyfriend wakes to voices at 3 a.m. Two people talking, near their tent. The moment he unzips quietly, the voices stop. That's awareness. That's proximity. That's surveillance. He rationalizes it. Public campsite. People stay up late. Men downplay threat when they lack proof. The next day, the note appears. Folded, tucked under the windshield wiper. You should move your tent. That's not a threat. That's positioning. Move your tent. Change your safety perimeter. Remember the first story. Rearrangement. When Aiden reappears, he tells them something strange. Weird stuff happens around here. Abandoned campsites, belongings left behind, people walking around at night. He's planting narrative. And here's the brilliance. He creates external fear, so he doesn't look like the threat. This is psychological displacement. When he says he heard people near his car and plans to leave before sunset, he's doing one of two things. Either he's telling the truth, or he's testing whether they will flee. They pack fast, stress rising, and as they drive out, they see his blue sedan, still there. Flat tire, massive slash, deliberate. He asks for a ride. The girlfriend whispers no. Instinct overrides empathy. As they drive down the dirt road, they see them. 3 figures in the woods, 30 feet off the road, standing still, not hiding, letting themselves be seen. The boyfriend taps the brake. The girlfriend screams at him to drive. That scream saved them. Here's the question that matters. Was Aiden bait? Or was he being hunted too? Because 3 figures don't need one blue sedan. They need opportunity. And men alone in the woods are experiments. We go deeper now, because the third story is where the mask fully drops.
Montana. Helena, Lewis and Clark National Forest. This one is different, because this man didn't stumble into isolation. He sought it. Divorced, restless, sleepless at 2 a.m., falling down backcountry forums looking for unofficial sites. You ever notice how men in pain don't numb themselves the way they used to? They don't go to church. They don't go to elders. They go off-grid, alone. He wanted to disappear for a week. No coordinates shared, just vague location to his brother. That's step 1 in vanishing. He loads his truck, freeze-dried meals, water purification tablets, first aid kit, and a Remington 700. Not paranoia, preparation. He drives 4 hours deep into Montana wilderness. GPS fails, service road not registered, overgrown trail, branches blocking path. He clears them. That detail matters. Someone allowed that trail to remain usable, barely. Isolation isn't just distance, it's filtration. When he finally parks, he feels confident he's alone. But the clearing already contains a tent. Old olive green, 1980s style, mold on the ceiling visible from 20 feet away. Here's what most men would do. Leave. But curiosity is stronger than caution when you think you're in control. He calls out. No answer. He unzips it. The smell hits him. Rot. Death adjacent. Inside, empty sleeping bag, soup cans, and a small notebook. Nothing else.
No body, no source for the stench. That's your first violation of logic. He grabs the notebook, pages filled with tally marks, grouped in sevens. Last page, 42 groups, over 8 months. Counting. Counting what? Days, nights, visitors, attempts? He keeps it. He sets up his own camp across the clearing. But here's the detail that should freeze your spine. He keeps the old tent in his line of sight. He doesn't want to lose visibility. Why? Because something in him knows it's not abandoned. Men feel watched before they have proof. That night, the stars are clear. He sleeps fast, and then he wakes. Heavy sleeper, wakes for a reason. Whispers. 2 or 3 voices, 20 feet from his tent. You need to understand something. When you go that deep alone and hear human voices, your nervous system doesn't register it as normal. It registers intrusion. He freezes, pretends to sleep. Footsteps circle his tent, like predators scenting prey. Then the zipper gets yanked. Clips hold it shut. Scratching begins, trying to cut through fabric. He speaks. "I have a gun. Back off." Immediate silence. Then multiple footsteps running in different directions. At least 3 people. That's coordination. That's perimeter testing. He doesn't fire. He waits for daylight. But daylight doesn't restore order. It removes illusions. Because when he steps out, the old moldy tent is gone. No stake holes, no ground depression, no flattened grass. It's as if it never existed. Except it did. He stared at it for hours. What he does find are barefoot human footprints encircling his camp. Different sizes, some deep, standing for long periods, watching. And one trail leading to a pine tree. Fresh cuts in the bark, tally marks, 7 groups of 7, and the start of an 8th, just like the notebook. Then he sees the message, a dead squirrel hanging from a branch, tied carefully with fishing line, positioned, displayed, not random, symbol. You still think these are isolated camping horror stories, or are you starting to see structure? Because we're about to connect them, and once you see the connection, you won't unsee it.
Now, stop thinking like a camper. Start thinking like an architect. 3 separate states: Colorado, North Carolina, Montana. 3 different groups, different ages, different motives. And yet, rearrangement, observation, formation, counting, multiple figures moving in coordination, symbols left behind. This is not random wilderness chaos. This is organized presence. In the first story, 4 tents repositioned into a square around a central stack of stones. In the second, a note instructing relocation. You should move your tent. In the third, tally marks, structured tracking over months. Movement, placement, enumeration. These are the language of systems. Ancient systems were built in forests. Before governments had buildings, they had groves. Before institutions had logos, they had symbols carved into bark and stone. You think secret societies were born in marble halls? No. They were born under tree canopies where no one could overhear. Here's what modern men underestimate. Isolation environments are laboratories. When you remove surveillance, you gain freedom. But when you remove witnesses, you gain control. The wilderness is the last uncontrolled territory in the American psyche, which makes it the perfect testing ground.
Look at the behavioral pattern in Montana. 8 months of tally marks, groups of 7. 7 is ritual timing, 7 days, 7 steps, 7 initiations, 7 circles. 42 groups recorded. Then fresh marks carved the night he arrived. That means they were active, still counting, still tracking, and when he announced he had a gun, they retreated, not because they were afraid, but because he broke the script. Predators don't escalate when resistance is credible. They adapt. In Colorado, the group knocked over the stone stack. Immediately a rumble, cause and effect. In North Carolina, 3 figures stand visibly off the road, not hiding, displaying, presence as message. In Montana, a squirrel hung deliberately, symbolic execution. Animals in ritual contexts represent warning, territory claimed, line crossed. You've been trained to see the forest as empty, as natural, as neutral. It isn't. It is the oldest institution on Earth. And institutions don't dissolve, they evolve. Here's the darker question. What if these weren't random encounters? What if certain coordinates, unofficial sites, backroads, forgotten clearings are known gathering points? What if forums don't just reveal locations, they filter candidates? Think. Who goes to unofficial backcountry sites alone? Men in transition, men in pain, men proving something to themselves. Prime psychological clay. Isolation strips ego. Fear opens compliance. Ritual rearranges identity. And the ones who leave different. Disconnected from friends, carrying notebooks, haunted. You're not hearing horror stories, you're hearing glimpses of perimeter systems. And the perimeter is closer than you think. We descend further now, because you haven't yet faced the real question. What were they counting?
What were they counting? Days alone? Visitors intercepted? Attempts completed? Or something far more unsettling? Subjects observed. Let's strip emotion away and examine pattern. In Montana, the notebook recorded over 8 months of tally marks in 7s. Then fresh marks appeared the exact night a new solo camper arrived. That suggests continuity, an ongoing operation. Now go back to Colorado. 4 tents repositioned into geometric alignment while occupants remained unconscious. No theft, no assault, no escalation, just placement. That wasn't predation. That was calibration. In North Carolina, 3 figures positioned themselves visibly in the trees. Not charging, not hiding, just standing. Visibility without engagement is dominance signaling. Animals do it. Military units do it. Psychological operations do it. And here's the thread tying all 3 together. They test reaction. Colorado, they moved them, waited, watched. Montana, they circled, tested zipper, retreated at resistance. In North Carolina, the girlfriend's scream overrode his hesitation. Alpha decision transfer. Every story contains assessment of male response under isolation pressure. Now, let's widen the lens. The United States has millions of acres of national forest, minimal surveillance, vast terrain, decades of missing persons cases that fade into cold files.
You think all disappearances are random? Or do you think certain environments allow experimentation without oversight? This isn't about some cartoon cult chanting in robes. This is about decentralized cells, small groups operating in forgotten pockets, testing, observing, documenting. The tally marks weren't chaotic, they were methodical. 7 groups of 7 carved fresh into a tree. After he arrived, he interrupted something. The dead squirrel? That wasn't random cruelty. It was escalation. Signal, you are now within scope. And here's what most men miss. None of the 3 groups were chased. None were attacked outright. Because the objective wasn't immediate harm. It was evaluation. They don't need everyone. They need responses. You're starting to feel it, aren't you? That tightening realization that wilderness horror might be structured, that fear might be a tool, that isolation might be recruitment ground, filtration process, or behavioral testing arena. Now we go deeper, because halfway down this rabbit hole there's a threshold, and crossing it changes how you see yourself. When we reach it, I'm going to ask something of you. Not for me, for you. Because identity isn't something you stumble into, it's something you lock in. And once locked, it doesn't unlock easily.
Let's go where most men refuse to go. Not into the forest, into the motive. You don't move 4 tents perfectly into a square for fun. You don't carve tally marks for 8 months out of boredom. You don't circle a lone camper barefoot at 3 a.m. just to scare him. Fear is efficient, but ritual is deliberate. And ritual requires belief. Here's the part you were never taught. Power structures don't always operate in cities. They originate in controlled environments where variables are limited. Think about elite military selection, remote, sleep deprivation, observation under stress, psychological evaluation in isolation. Now remove the uniforms, remove the paperwork, remove the official logos. You're left with something older. Unofficial selection, unofficial filtration, unofficial testing. Men in transition are the most malleable demographic on Earth. Divorced, heartbroken, disconnected from friend groups, seeking meaning, camping alone to clear their head. You see vulnerability. A system sees raw material. In Montana, he stumbled onto an active site. The moldy tent wasn't abandoned, it was bait, a relic to provoke curiosity. Curiosity reveals courage to caution ratio. Does he approach? Does he investigate? Does he take the notebook? He did. That tells you something about him. The zipper test at night, boundary pressure. How fast does he respond? Does he freeze? Does he panic? Does he assert dominance? He spoke with force. I have a gun. That's decisive. So they retreated. Colorado, group compliance assessment. They slept unnaturally heavy. Whether environmental, chemical, or psychological, it doesn't matter. They were repositioned. None woke. That's data. When the stones fell, the rumble followed. Environmental trigger or controlled sound projection? Doesn't matter. They fled in unity, group cohesion intact. North Carolina,
Male protective instinct evaluation. He heard voices and went outside. Guardian response present. He received the note and confronted Aiden. Assertiveness moderate. When the three figures appeared, he braked. Empathy almost overrode survival. Girlfriend's scream forced final decision. Every scenario measures something. Reaction speed, dominance assertion, risk tolerance, attachment prioritization. And here's where it becomes uncomfortable. What if some men don't leave? What if some stay the second night? What if some accept the ride? What if some follow the figures into the woods? We only hear from survivors. We never hear from the compliant. You're not paranoid for seeing patterns. You're perceptive. Systems hide best in plain sight when disguised as randomness. Now we're at the threshold, halfway down, and this is where awareness becomes choice. If you're still here, it means something inside you recognizes the pattern. So I want you to do something deliberate, not casually, not ironically. In the comments, type this phrase, I see the pattern. Then type it again, I see the pattern. Twice, not for engagement, for imprint, because repetition hardwires identity. You're not just watching stories anymore, you're training perception. And once you see patterns in the woods, you start seeing them everywhere. Now we descend into what those patterns mean, and this is where it stops being about camping.
Good. If you typed it twice, something subtle just happened. You shifted from passive consumer to active observer. That's the first separation. Now let's go further. What if the forest isn't just a backdrop? What if it's infrastructure? In every one of these stories, the setting shares key traits: remote but accessible, difficult to find but discussed quietly in forums, no cell service, minimal oversight. You know what that creates? Operational freedom. Governments rely on visibility. Corporations rely on digital tracking. Cities rely on cameras. But forests? Forests rely on memory, and memory is unreliable. Let's talk about the geometry in Colorado again. 4 tents, square formation, central stone stack. That isn't random positioning. The square is containment. 4 corners define boundary. The center defines focus. They were placed like points in a diagram. Now imagine standing above that clearing at night, from a ridge, from a drone, from the trees. You'd see a symbol, and symbols matter. In Montana, the tally marks weren't scribbled, they were grouped intentionally. 7, 7, 7, 7. 7 is ritual timing, yes, but it's also cycle tracking, behavioral repetition tracking, training cycles, observation windows, and fresh marks carved the night a new man entered the clearing. That is not coincidence. That is continuity. North Carolina, 3 figures positioned 30 feet off the road, visible in headlights. That's not ambush distance, that's psychological distance. Close enough to be seen, far enough to avoid capture. Why show themselves at all? Because sometimes presence is the message. Here's a hard truth. Power doesn't always need to act, it needs to be known. When ancient groups initiated men into secret orders, the first phase wasn't violence, it was destabilization,
sleep disruption, environmental disorientation, symbol exposure, testing fear thresholds. Strip a man of routine, place him in darkness, whisper outside his shelter, reposition his environment. You don't need to touch him, you let his mind do the work. By the time daylight returns, he questions his reality, and once a man questions reality, he becomes moldable. Now, here's the part that changes the narrative. What if these weren't hunting operations? What if they were sorting mechanisms? Some men panic and flee. Some men assert and resist. Some men hesitate. Some men stay curious. Selection doesn't require force. It requires filtration. And where better to filter than the one place modern men go to find themselves, the woods? You think it's coincidence that so many men go alone after divorce, after heartbreak, after career collapse? You think that's random? Or is that when they're most open to transformation? The forest has always been where initiations happen, but modern men walk in blind. We go deeper now, because once you understand filtration, you start asking the question you've been avoiding. Who's running it?
Who's running it? That's the question that separates fantasy from strategy.
Why men? Why not families? Why not random hikers? Why not crowded campgrounds? Because this isn't chaos, it's calibration. Men between 18 and 40, especially those in transition, are psychologically volatile in a specific way. Not weak, volatile, meaning identity is flexible. Belief systems are under revision. Purpose is either forming or collapsing, and that makes a man dangerous to himself or useful to someone else. Throughout history, male initiation rites took place away from civilization. Sparta didn't train warriors in the marketplace, they sent them into wilderness alone. Deprivation sharpens perception. Fear fractures ego. Silence amplifies thought. And when a man survives something disorienting in isolation, he emerges altered. Now imagine exploiting that mechanism. You don't need mass numbers, you need a steady stream of candidates. men already primed for change. The Montana camper was divorced. The North Carolina boyfriend was fighting stagnation. The Colorado group was on the brink of adulthood. Identity crossroads. You see coincidence, I see selection timing. Let's talk about something uncomfortable. Modern society strips men of structured initiation. There's no rite of passage, no trial by ordeal, no elder guiding the transformation. So men seek it themselves. Ultramarathons, solo camping, extreme sports, isolation challenges. They are unconsciously searching for initiation. And when someone or something intercepts that search, you have leverage. In Colorado, they experienced synchronized emotional merging. That's group identity destabilization. In North Carolina, the boyfriend's protective instinct was triggered and tested. In Montana, the divorced man faced perimeter intimidation and symbolic threat. Each scenario pressures masculine identity differently. Cohesion, protection, dominance assertion, fear tolerance. This isn't random fear theater, it's stress testing. Now, ask yourself something deeper. If you wanted to understand how modern men react under primal conditions, where would you study them? Urban environments are contaminated by noise. Digital spaces are curated. But in the forest, stripped of signal and surveillance, a man is closer to his base programming. That's clean data. And data is power. You think power structures stopped evolving in the 20th century? You think experimentation ended when headlines became inconvenient? No, it moved, it decentralized, it adapted. Forests offer one more advantage: disbelief. If a man reports whispers, tent movement, figures in trees, tally marks, he sounds unstable, paranoid, emotional, which protects the system from scrutiny. Now we descend further, because there's another layer beneath recruitment, beneath testing, beneath observation, and it involves something men rarely confront. What happens when fear becomes fascination? What happens when fear becomes fascination? That's the pivot point. Because the first emotion in all three stories wasn't terror, it was curiosity. Colorado, they examined the stones before they fled. Montana, he entered the moldy tent instead of walking away. North Carolina, the boyfriend braked the car when he saw the figures. Curiosity overrides instinct in intelligent men, and that's exploitable. Here's a truth most institutions understand. The fastest way to pull a man deeper isn't force, it's mystery. You don't chase him, you let him lean forward. You leave the notebook, you carve the tallies, you stand in the headlights. You move the tents and disturb nothing else. You create a fracture in reality, small enough that he questions himself, not you. Once doubt turns inward, control shifts outward. Men pride themselves on rationality. So when they experience something irrational, they search for logical explanations. Wind, animals, sleepwalking, pranksters. They begin arguing against their own perception. That's internal destabilization, and destabilized men seek meaning. Now imagine if one of them didn't leave. Imagine the Montana camper stayed another night, armed, alert, expecting escalation. What would happen? Maybe nothing. Maybe whispers again. Maybe a symbol left closer. Maybe a voice that doesn't run. The hook is repetition. Ritual always requires multiple exposures. 1 night is anomaly. 2 nights is pattern. 3 nights is belief. The notebook showed 8 months of tallies. That's patience, long-term operation, no rush, no panic. Because time is leverage. You know what else time does? It normalizes the abnormal. The first whisper terrifies you. The 5th whisper intrigues you. The 10th whisper invites response. Humans adapt to stimulus shock faster than they realize. Now consider the dead squirrel. It wasn't mutilated randomly. It was positioned deliberately. A message. When you display a symbol without explanation, you activate projection. The mind fills in the blank, and whatever it imagines is more powerful than any spoken threat. This is how psychological dominance works. You let the subject scare himself. You simply provide the frame. The forest provides the rest. Darkness, silence, isolation. You don't need to overpower a man physically when you can destabilize him cognitively. And once fear shifts into fascination, he stops running, he starts looking back. Now ask yourself honestly, if you were alone out there and you found tally marks that matched a notebook, would you leave immediately, or would a part of you want to know more? Be honest, because that answer reveals something about you, and the system, whatever it is, counts on that. We're about to go deeper than environment and psychology, because the final layer isn't about them, it's about you.
This is where the narrative turns. Not outward, inward. Because here's the possibility you've been circling without naming. What if nothing organized is running this? No cells, no decentralized network, no forest filtration system. What if the only consistent structure across every story is the human mind under isolation stress? Let's break the pattern cleanly. Montana, divorced, alone, in unfamiliar terrain, hyper-alert at night. Colorado, young men at identity threshold, mild alcohol, deep sleep disruption, group emotional contagion. North Carolina, relationship strain, tension already present, night driving fatigue, ambiguous silhouettes in headlights. Now remove the mystique. Add sleep deprivation, add darkness, add silence, add expectation. You get amplification. The human brain is a pattern detection machine. In the woods, it overclocks. Every snap is intentional. Every shadow is shaped. Every whisper is directed. Because evolution wired men to assume agency in the dark. Better to mistake wind for a predator than a predator for wind. Now look at the behaviors, investigating abandoned objects, interpreting geometric meaning in random arrangements, assigning ritual significance to tally marks, projecting intent onto distant figures. This isn't stupidity, it's survival software. But here's the deeper layer.
Modern men rarely experience true environmental silence. No traffic, no hum of appliances, no constant digital feedback. When the noise disappears, your internal signal gets loud, very loud. Thought loops intensify, memory resurfaces, unresolved identity questions rise. Who am I now? What am I rebuilding? Am I strong enough? Am I failing? In isolation, those questions don't whisper, they echo. So when something external happens, a zipper movement, a stone falling, a shape on the road, it fuses with internal instability, and the brain constructs narrative. Narrative restores order, even if that order is someone is testing me, because that feels more structured than I'm alone in the dark, confronting myself. Now here's the part that matters. Fear turning into fascination. That's not about secret recruitment. It's about meaning hunger. Men crave ordeal. They crave initiation. They crave proof of resilience. So when something ambiguous challenges them, part of them doesn't want it to be random. They want it to mean something, even if that meaning is sinister. Because sinister still implies purpose, and purposelessness is harder to face than danger. Read that again. Purposelessness is harder to face than danger. What if the forest experiences weren't filtration systems, but mirrors? Mirrors reflecting identity instability. Mirrors amplifying internal fracture. Mirrors asking, who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when you're afraid? Who are you without Wi-Fi, validation, noise? Every man in those stories left, but they didn't leave unchanged. They left with a story, a mythic edge to their identity. I faced something. That matters psychologically. Now here's the final question. Not about the woods, not about shadow figures, about you. When you typed yes each time, why? Was it curiosity, momentum, desire to go deeper? Or was it something else? The need for the pattern to resolve? Because that's the same hook the forest uses. Unfinished loops demand closure. Mystery demands descent. And now you see it. The real pattern isn't out there. It's here, inside the need to know what's next. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. The woods don't recruit men. The woods reveal them. And whatever you saw in this descent, that reflection belongs to you.
Now we do something most stories avoid. We integrate. Because the danger was never the forest, and it was never a hidden network. It was escalation without awareness. You just experienced how easily the mind can climb. Ambiguous event, to pattern, to coordination, to system, to intent, to purpose. That ladder feels logical while you're on it. Each step seems small, reasonable, connected, until you zoom out. This is how conspiracy thinking forms. This is how urban legends spread. This is how intelligent people construct elaborate structures from incomplete data. not because they're irrational, because they're pattern fluent. And pattern fluency without constraint becomes pattern addiction. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. The same cognitive engine that builds paranoia, builds innovation, builds strategy, builds leadership. Pattern detection is not a flaw, it's power. But power needs calibration. In the woods, isolation amplifies internal signal. Online, algorithms amplify emotional signal. In groups, shared narrative amplifies belief signal. The mechanism is identical. Environment changes, psychology doesn't. You said yes 13 times. That's micro-commitment psychology. Each affirmation lowers resistance to the next escalation. Sales funnels use it. Cults use it. Interrogations use it. Motivational seminars use it. Small agreement to bigger agreement to identity alignment. You weren't manipulated, but you felt the pull. That matters. Because now you can recognize it elsewhere. When someone builds urgency slowly, when someone stacks half-true patterns, when someone frames randomness as orchestration, when someone implies hidden selection, you'll feel the architecture. And here's the strongest position a man can hold. Curious, but grounded. Open, but evidence-seeking. Imaginative, but falsifiable. The woods didn't reveal secret systems. They revealed how quickly narrative gravity forms. And narrative gravity is powerful. If directed outward blindly, it creates fear. If directed inward consciously, it creates insight. So, here's the real initiation. Can you enjoy mystery without surrendering reason? Can you explore patterns without worshiping them? Can you feel tension without needing resolution? That's psychological maturity. Not fearlessness. Not skepticism so rigid it rejects everything, but balance. You walked through escalation and came out reflective. That's not weakness. That's awareness under stimulus. And awareness is the only real protection in forests, online, or anywhere ambiguity lives. Now, tell me, do you want to dissect the mechanics further, or shift gears into something completely different?
There's one detail none of them noticed at the time, but every single one mentioned it later. Silence. Not normal forest silence, not the calm, peaceful kind, the wrong kind. In Montana, he said the crickets stopped. Completely. He didn't notice it immediately. Only when they started again at sunrise did he realize they'd been gone. In Colorado, one of the guys remembered something strange. When the rumble happened, when the stones fell, there were no night sounds. No wind through trees, no distant wildlife, just that low vibration, and then nothing. North Carolina? When the boyfriend stepped out of the car, he said the air felt thick, heavy, like before a storm, but the forecast was clear. Here's what makes that detail disturbing. Predators silence environments. It's a documented phenomenon. When something unfamiliar enters a territory, animals go quiet. They don't investigate. They withdraw. Now think about the timing. Montana, silence before the zipper moved. Colorado, silence before the rumble. North Carolina, silence before the figures appeared. That's not imagination, that's sequence, and sequence creates pattern. There's one more layer. All 3 incidents happened between 2 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. That window matters. It's when body temperature is lowest, cognitive processing is slowest, fear response is highest, and something else. It's when most people are in deep REM. Hardest to wake, hardest to think clearly. Colorado's group didn't wake while being moved. That detail becomes heavier now, because if they were repositioned, it happened in that window. Montana's camper, he checked his phone after the scratching, 2:47 a.m. North Carolina, the dashboard clock read 3:12. That's not proof, but it's proximity, and proximity is enough to disturb. Here's the question none of them can answer. If it was just pranksters, why operate only in that window? Why not confront? Why not steal? Why not escalate? Instead, it's always presence, manipulation, withdrawal. Almost like something doesn't want harm. It wants awareness. And awareness at 3 a.m. feels different than awareness at noon. Now, here's where it tightens. After each incident, each man reported something similar. For weeks after returning home, they would wake up suddenly around the same time, between 2 and 3 a.m. No noise, no reason, just awake, heart racing, listening. That's not supernatural, that's imprint. When fear hits during a specific time window, the brain anchors to it, and anchors resurface. But here's the last piece. Montana's camper eventually went back. 6 months later, daylight, armed, prepared. The clearing was empty. No tent, no tallies, no stone ring, nothing, like it had never existed. Colorado's clearing, when they returned with 2 more friends a month later, there were no disturbed patches in the dirt, no marks from tents being dragged, no indentation from the stone stack. Flat ground. North Carolina couple drove the same road in daylight. There was no shoulder wide enough for 3 people to stand where they saw them. Just trees, tight against the pavement. Which leaves you with 2 options. Either 3 separate groups hallucinated environmental inconsistencies under stress, or they intersected something that doesn't linger. Section 15 will go deeper into what vanishing evidence actually means. But this time, it won't involve shadows. It'll involve something far more documented.
Vanishing evidence sounds supernatural. It isn't. It's tactical. There's a concept search and rescue teams know well. Environmental reset. Forests erase disturbance faster than people understand. Wind redistributes soil. Moisture swells ground. Animals investigate and scatter objects. Footprints collapse. Indentations rise. Give it days, sometimes hours, and a clearing can look untouched. But that doesn't explain everything, because all 3 groups returned too soon. Too little time for total reset. So here's the darker documented reality. There are people who operate in national forests without being officially there. Not ghosts, not cults. Transient groups, illegal grow operations, off-grid survivalists, unregistered hunting parties, squat encampments that relocate frequently, and those people do not want witnesses. You stumble onto the wrong site, you won't be attacked immediately. You'll be assessed. Are you armed, alone, returning, curious? Montana's moldy tent could have been an old observation post, abandoned but still monitored. Colorado's square formation, a perimeter layout, defensive positioning, central gear stack. When the rumble happened after the stones fell, it may not have been ritual. It could have been movement, men repositioning in the dark, heavy boots on hollow ground. North Carolina's figures? Spotters, standing just visible enough to discourage stopping, because fear makes people leave faster than confrontation does. And here's the part that's very real. Illegal operations often use psychological deterrence. Whistles, footsteps, movement around camps, subtle repositioning of objects, not to haunt, to warn. You don't report, "We found something illegal." You report, "Something weird happened." That protects them. Now, the 2 to 3 a.m. window, that's shift rotation time in many off-grid operations. Deep night, lowest civilian activity, best visibility control. Silence in the woods. Animals react to human clusters moving through territory. It's not mystical, it's biological. So what did all three groups likely encounter? Not a supernatural force, not a secret initiation network, but humans who do not want to be found. And humans in the dark protecting something are far more dangerous than any shadow myth, because they are rational. And rational people with something to lose will escalate if pushed. Here's what's unsettling. Each group left before escalation. They felt watched, warned, moved. That may have been the final courtesy, because in isolated areas there are no cameras, no quick response times, no witnesses, just trees and intention.
There's a reason so many unexplainable camping stories come from the same types of locations. Remote national forests, patchy jurisdiction, low patrol frequency, difficult terrain. Let's ground this in reality. In the United States alone, there are vast areas inside forests like Shasta Trinity National Forest, Pisgah National Forest, and Flathead National Forest, where law enforcement response times can stretch far beyond what most people are used to. Miles between campsites, limited cell coverage, multiple access roads. That environment doesn't just attract hikers. It attracts people who don't want to be seen. Illegal marijuana grows have been discovered deep inside protected land. Temporary encampments appear and vanish. Poachers operate at night. Unregistered hunting groups move quietly. And here's the important part. These operations often use deterrence without confrontation. Why? Because confrontation creates reports. Reports create investigation. Investigation creates exposure. So instead, they rely on psychological pressure. Move something small. Circle a campsite. Stand visible but out of reach. Make noise without revealing position. Most campers will leave voluntarily. Which is exactly what happened in all three stories.
Now think about Colorado's repositioned tents. If multiple adults approached silently while others were in deep sleep, they could move light equipment quickly, especially if the goal wasn't theft. It was territory control. Montana's dead squirrel. That's a classic intimidation marker. It says, "We're here. You're not alone. Leave." North Carolina's roadside figures. That could have been scouts making sure no one pulled off near a hidden trail access. The reason the evidence vanished later, because temporary operations don't stay fixed. They relocate constantly. No trace, no pattern, no record. And the reason these stories feel supernatural, because humans in the dark are terrifying. When you remove lighting, remove digital noise, remove visibility, your brain fills in the gaps, and the gaps feel larger than reality. But here's the unsettling truth. It's not comforting to replace mystery with criminals. It's worse, because criminals are real. They adapt, they observe, they don't announce themselves. And if you wander into the wrong clearing at 2:47 a.m., you don't get folklore. You get evaluated. All three groups made the correct decision. They left. No heroics, no investigation, no second night. That choice is likely why these are stories and not missing person cases.
Strip away the atmosphere. Strip away the escalation. Strip away the mystery. What remains is this. Remote wilderness is not empty. Places like Flathead National Forest, Pisgah National Forest, and Shasta Trinity National Forest span millions of acres. Large portions are rarely patrolled at night. Response times can stretch far beyond what most people expect. When you camp deep enough, you are outside the bubble of quick help, and that changes the rules. Here's what these three incidents, whether caused by illegal activity, territorial locals, or something far less dramatic, make clear. 1. If something feels off, leave. Not investigate, not document, not confront. Leave. Every group that walked away stayed safe. 2. Night distortion is real. Between 2 and 3 a.m., your cognitive processing is slower, threat perception is higher, and your environment is at peak darkness. Ambiguous movement becomes intent. Noise becomes presence. Silence becomes threat. You will not think as clearly as you believe you will. 3. Remote doesn't mean unoccupied. Forests are used by hunters, transient groups, off-grid survivalists, illegal operations, people who simply don't want to be found. You may never see them clearly, but they may see you. 4. Psychological deterrence works. Moving tents, stacking stones, leaving markers, standing just visible enough to be seen. None of that requires supernatural explanation. Humans use fear efficiently, and fear travels faster than confrontation. Now here's the most important point. The scariest part of these stories wasn't shadows, it was vulnerability. No signal, no witnesses, limited visibility, limited control. That vulnerability feels ancient.
And when modern men encounter ancient vulnerability, it hits hard. That's why these stories linger, not because they're paranormal, but because they remind you, when you're deep enough in the woods, you are not the dominant presence. You are just another creature trying to make it to sunrise. This closes the series. 3 disturbing true camping stories, not about monsters, about isolation, about territory, about the thin line between curiosity and risk, and about knowing to leave.
The image wasn't taken during the night. That's what makes it worse. It was taken the next morning, Montana. After the scratching, after the whispers, after the dead squirrel. Before he packed up, he took one last photo of his tent. He said it was instinct, proof that nothing physical had happened, just in case he needed to convince himself later. When he got home, he didn't check the photos immediately. 2 days passed before he opened the gallery. The first few shots were normal: campfire, tree line, sunset. Then the last one. The tent in daylight. White fabric, front flap slightly open, and behind it, a shape. Inside. Not clearly visible, not detailed, just darker than the interior should have been, like someone standing at the back wall of the tent. But he was alone. He remembers unzipping it that morning. He remembers looking inside. Sleeping bag, backpack, nothing else. The photo showed depth where there shouldn't have been depth. He zoomed in. The pixels broke apart, but the silhouette remained. Vertical, human height, too centered to be shadow distortion. He checked the metadata. Timestamp, 6:12 a.m. He left the site at 6:40. No one had approached the clearing during that window. At least, no one he saw. He considered 2 explanations: lighting artifact, lens shadow, except the shadow didn't align with sun direction, and it didn't appear in the other photos. He deleted the image, then checked his trash folder. It was still there. He deleted it again. Weeks later, while searching his gallery for something else, the image reappeared, not restored, just present. Same file name, same timestamp. He showed it to one friend. The friend said it looked like compression noise, nothing more. But here's the final detail he never shared publicly. When he zoomed in one last time before permanently wiping his phone, he noticed something near the top of the shape. 2 faint, lighter spots. Not glowing, just lighter, roughly where eyes would be. He never camped alone again, and he never tried to return to that clearing. Because whether it was a trick of light, or something that stepped inside after he zipped the tent, the worst part wasn't the possibility it had been there. It was the possibility it was there when he took the photo. He told himself the photo was a glitch, compression artifact, light distortion, pareidolia. The brain finds shapes where none exist. That explanation held, barely,
for 3 weeks. Then the audio surfaced. When he had camped in Montana, he'd left his phone recording inside the tent one night. Not intentionally. He used a white noise app to drown out small forest sounds. The app automatically saved background audio sessions. He forgot about it until he was clearing storage. There it was, 3 hours, 11 minutes, recorded between 1:58 a.m. and 5:09 a.m., the same night as the scratching. Curiosity overrode hesitation. He put on headphones. The first hour was normal. Fabric shifting, wind brushing canvas, distant insects. Then at 2:43 a.m. it changed. The crickets stopped, not gradually, instantly. Silence flattened everything. For 12 full seconds there was nothing. Then a sound, not outside, inside, soft pressure against nylon, as if someone leaned a palm against the tent wall from within. The audio captured the faint stretch of fabric, then breathing, not his, slower, measured, very close to the microphone. He remembered lying frozen that night, listening to scratching on the outside, but the audio suggested something else. The movement wasn't circling, it was shifting position inside the tent. At 2:47 a.m., his own voice appears in the recording, low, shaky. "I have a gun." The breathing stops immediately, but the pressure sound doesn't move outward. It moves backward, deeper, as if retreating into the rear corner of the tent. There's no zipper sound, no flap movement, no exit. Just silence returning slowly. Then at 2:52 a.m., the crickets resume, exactly as before. He replayed that 5-minute segment over 30 times. Each time he tried to interpret it. Could he have rolled in his sleep, shifted his elbow, pressed against the wall himself? The timing doesn't align. His breathing pattern in the recording is rapid. The other breathing is controlled, almost patient. He deleted the file, then restored it, then deleted it permanently. Months later, when he upgraded his phone and transferred data, the recording was not in the backup, but something else was. A corrupted audio file with no playable length, file name 2:47 a.m. He never created that label. When he tried to open it, the phone froze. Twice, he stopped trying. To this day, he doesn't claim something was in the tent. He says only this: "I know what it sounds like when I'm alone." And that wasn't alone.
He told no one about the corrupted file. Not the ranger, not his friend, not even the online forum where he first shared the clearing story. Instead, he tried something reckless. He went back. Not to the same spot. Close. Within 2 miles of the original clearing, but not identical terrain. He chose a different access road, different trailhead, different coordinates. He told himself this was closure. He arrived before sunset again, set up camp again, same white tent. This time, he placed a small trail camera facing his campsite, motion activated, infrared. If someone approached, he'd have proof. Night fell slower than he remembered. Every sound felt amplified.
but nothing happened. Midnight passed. 1 a.m. 2 a.m. No scratching, no silence drop, no footsteps. At 2:46 a.m., he checked the time intentionally. Nothing.